Okay, well, good morning and welcome everybody to our third webinar of SAGE in 2020. Really excited about today's program, and thank you so much, Mitch, Danielle, and Bob, for joining us this morning. Before we get started, I want to thank obviously our annual sponsors that we have up on the screen over here, and there's just too many to mention, but especially with SAGE turning 30 this year, I want to just take a minute and give a big thank you to our all-time long-standing sponsors, starting with Rancho Mission Viejo, All Valley Washer Services, High Ridge Costa Housing Partners, First Service Residential, WSH Management, USA Property Funds, and MBK Senior Living. So today, thank you for joining us. We actually want to take a closer look at the changes that are happening today in the active adult market and what you need to know, especially from an operational standpoint. So I thought as a lead-in, I would take a quote that was recently published by John Burns, and I'm very curious if our panelists will agree with that. And the headline was "The Return of the Active Adult Buyer." So currently we're seeing that builders and developers are putting the appropriate health precautions in place. Secondly, home sales have been particularly strong in August and September. And thirdly, the pandemic has not changed the size of the active adult population or its motivation. So today we will hear from some of our industry experts on how the active adult is changing and how the pandemic has impacted this specific market segment. With that, I would like to welcome our speakers and introduce Mitch Brown, who will lead us through today's discussion. Mitch has been active in the active adult industry for decades, previously development officer at Kiscor Senior Living for over 20 years. For almost 3 years now, he is the Senior Managing Director, Active Adult of Greystar. For those of you who don't know, Greystar is a huge international real estate company founded in 1993. The company has over 14,000 employees and roughly 49 rental communities in 10 states. So without further ado, I will hand it over to our moderator, Mitch.
Thanks, Katja. Welcome, everybody. We're excited to be back at our hometown 55 plus SAGE. I've been involved with this council for a long time and was on the board for several years, and it's great to be here. And all three of us are Southern California based and do a lot of work in this area as well as in other parts of the country. So we're going to go through a quick sort of introductory PowerPoint for you this morning and just set some parameters. And then we've got a few questions of our own that we sort of put together as a team to lead off with. And then we're going to open up the Q&A, and either Katja or I will pick off some questions that we'll try to answer. We're trying to keep this to an hour, so we're going to get started right away. So here we go. Hopefully this share screen thing works. Let's share. There we go. Everybody can see that, hopefully. Let's go to slideshow. I'm beginning. All right. So obviously we've evolved. I mean, the SAGE board came up with this title about, you know, how our world is changing rapidly. I think senior housing as an industry changes rapidly, but active adult as a sort of a nascent asset class possibly changes even more rapidly, at least from those of us that are in the midst of it. And you know, both before and after, you know, before COVID and now during COVID, it's been interesting to watch how it's evolved, and we'll touch on that a little bit. So, you know, first of all, you know, what is it and what isn't it? Maybe I should get rid of this. So this is a slide I stole from Margaret Wild years ago, and we both kicked it back and forth several times. But you know, we all know this continuum slide. We've all seen it with the more individual choice-based options on the left, and the more need-driven, typically family-oriented, you know, sons and daughter choices with residents on the right. You know, these ages haven't changed that much over the years for those of us that have been doing this for a long time. Certainly traditional IL, the old congregate living as we know it, has moved up dramatically in age. Today, it's typically more toward the high end of this, toward the 85 side, other than in the CCRCs. But what we're talking about today, obviously, is here in the age qualified or age restricted, and specifically rental versus for sale active adult, like Del Webb or Margaritaville or the like. So I stole this slide from Beth Mace at NIC. Couldn't be more true today, as some of us on this call are approaching that bigger number there, still thinking of ourselves as 40 or 50 somethings. And we all know that that's the case, and how this affects what we do every day is really important, the perception of the prospects. How do we define this thing? I mean, everybody hates senior housing terminology. Do you call it, we've tried to abolish the word senior, some people abolish the word retirement. We've done a bunch of focus groups, and our residents actually like to be called active adults, surprisingly. So we've kept it. Whether it's the right terminology or not remains to be seen, and I'm sure that debate will go on. But this little chart here is really kind of a good one, in that it really lays out all the typically potentially inclusive things on the left side as you get up into the more needs and care-based side of the business, and the what's in the choice-based side, along with the average ages. And I think these numbers are relatively accurate today. So most active adult, almost everything in our communities is a la carte. There's very little inclusive services, other than the idea of trying to create socialization, and Bob's going to speak to that in just a minute. And then this is, looking at this as a large multifamily company that operates 650,000 units. We talk about, at Greystar, we talk about the 4 stages of life, and we cover student, we cover newly graduated young professionals, we cover mature professionals, and we cover now senior, up to but not including anything that's needs-based. And we are staying in the active adult space ourselves, but you can see the gap in the middle, and that's kind of where we're those of us in this space are playing today. And then just a real quick snippet on Greystar. That's one of our more recently opened communities in Austin, Texas, in the middle of a big mixed-use master plan called The Domain. A building was opened about a year ago. And then this is our portfolio today. We have 12 acquisitions that are all open, stabilized, performing really well, and have weathered through COVID better than I ever would have imagined. We have 42 ground up projects, the first batch of which are nearing stabilization. They opened within the last couple of years. And then we do manage for third parties about 10, legacy managed 10 buildings, and we're talking about doing that now with our dedicated active adult team, which has been formed for about 2.5, 3 years, and now numbers about 45 people. So we have kind of a smile geography, as you can see, and we like being clustered in markets and locations where we can do multiple assets in one MSA. So I'm going to go to Danielle now and let her talk about Clearwater, and then Danielle's going to introduce Bob, and we're going to go through Bob's slides, which really, I think, lead us through sort of a pioneer owner operator developer's journey, and then we'll do some Q&A. Danielle?
Thanks, Mitch. So Clearwater Living was formed 4 years ago as a developer owner operator, and to date we're more of a traditional developer and operator over IL, AL, and memory support. We have a total of 357 units currently under operation, 218 currently under construction. We'll break ground on another 154 units early November. And then we have 800 plus units currently under development, which I think it's important to add that active adult is part of our future plans. And that comes from Tony Ferrero, our CEO and founder of the company, that has prior experience in developing and operating active adult, actually years ago with Mitch when they were at Kisco together. And his passion for continuing to develop in the active adult space, and like I mentioned, coordinating active adult into larger campuses. And we actually have a community in Rohnert Park that's assisted living and memory care. However, it's adjacent to a active adult community that Mitch and Tony worked on years ago together. And it really has served more as a campus and has been a real asset to, in addition to that Rohnert Park community.
That's great. Thanks, Danielle. Excellent. And yeah, Tony was actually an inspiration for Kisco to do the first 4 active adult properties we did in the early 2000s, and all of which have turned out to be very nice communities for the owners that eventually acquired those. Now I'm going to turn to Bob, and we're going to go through some of these slides. Bob, you're just going to have to cue me when you want to move, but Bob, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mitch. I first want to give a nice shout out to all of our sponsors. It's through your generosity that as peers we're able to share our stories and share the journey as we go through it. And I certainly appreciate the Sage Council for making the focus today the active adult. It's I know it's of high interest to everyone on this webinar for sure, and it certainly is a high interest to every publication that's out there. And so hopefully today we'll share with you our experiences, and then you can make a decision as to what your thoughts and feelings are on it. Avenida Partners is a Newport Beach-based company. We have a small office in Nashville that we operate in the southeast area. We're about 18 people strong. So, you know, compared to both Danielle and Mitch's organizations, we're the David, and Graystar is the big Goliath, but we kind of like that position. It keeps us sharp and keeps us motivated. With the total of 18 people, I characterize it as we've got 17 high achievers and myself. So, you know, I'm humbled to be on this panel. And as Mitch had mentioned, and so did Danielle, you know, everybody that has made an attempt at active adult, I'm appreciative of, because we've gone and learned. And in the development business, we really just steal each other's best ideas and then try to put a twist and apply it. And we are certainly guilty of that. And we are doing it on a national footprint. We are about to finish our 7th active adult project, and pipeline of 5 more that will start within the next 12 months. We've had 1 that's gone full cycle, and we have 6 that are in lease up. So, you know, any stories that I might tell you today are in the midst of the fog of war. So I hope you'll believe me when I tell you what our experience is. And so Mitch, if you move through to the next slide. I think Mitch showed a previous slide that had at the bottom the only 2 combinations of residential or shelter and then services. And what we saw the opportunity to be is the lifestyle, and that orange box in the middle between those 2 darker gray boxes on the left, which is where, you know, 93% of all seniors are located. They're not in formal, professionally managed senior living properties. What we saw as an opportunity as a bridge product, where it was all about the lifestyle. It wasn't about care. It wasn't about food service. They were truly independent living, and they were looking for a new way of life. They wanted that 3rd act to be something exciting. So it's all about the lifestyle. We've listed a couple things on the right side of that orange box. You know, the things that are demand drivers: the socialization, the safety, security because of the size and the fact that it is age restricted, the activities program. All our projects are purpose built. They're designed just for the active adult resident. We do have a transportation program that is more ad hoc and a little loose right now. And of course, a la carte services. We try to offer what might be needed in that particular location. So if we go to the next one, Mitch. The next 2 slides are going to be the big head fakes. And this is certainly, you know, what we used to talk with our investors and our lenders about the demographics, just the sheer numbers. And I do want to warn you, if you think that's going to save you, you're going to be greatly disappointed. This product of active adult, and I don't mean to patronize or condescend anybody that's in the business, but it really is threading the needle. It is a unique asset class, and every project is almost a laboratory. And there's really 4 questions in this beta phase of development that we're trying to figure out. Who is the active adult resident? What do they want? What will they pay for it? And then how much does it cost to operate? And those 4 questions seem to change in every location and every single project. And so it's a bit of a Rubik's Cube or 3-dimensional chess, makes it exciting, but it's also where the biggest challenge is. And, I was thinking about it this morning, and for every developer that's out there, like myself, and we're relatively small, but we're trying to do 4 to 6 projects a year. Every developer that's out there doing active adult, I can name a developer that either came from multifamily or from senior living, tried it and then quit. Because I do believe it's a business that you can't be 1 foot in and 1 foot out. You've got to be totally dedicated to it. It's a demanding tenant. They're there 24/7. They have high expectations, and it's the baby boomers who have always gotten what they've wanted, and now they want it all. Don't necessarily want to pay for it all. So go to the next slide, Mitch.
Yeah, boy, ditto to all that.
Yeah.
Again, just terrific stuff to show your investor and lender, but the reality is it's a very, very provincial business. And so if we go to the next slide, Mitch, I think that that's not a COVID curve. That's the dispersion of our residents. And we're just at about 1,000 units. And so that shows you I'm a really little David compared to what Mitch is doing.
Well,
as
and just
one of the trailblazers.
And Bob, to layer on that, because I mean, we compare notes a lot in our data. I mean, obviously we have 10,000 residents now, but it's a very similar story. It's a bell curve of some shape and size. But as Bob says, we, not our buildings, but we've seen other buildings in South Florida, which is already a retirement area, where the average age in some of these is up over 80 years old. And then, we've seen communities. We have a building in West Riverside near La Sierra University, where the average age is 68. So I think Bob's spot on when he talks about the fact that this is it's still, you can have generalizations, but just like traditional senior housing, each location is unique and has to be approached that way.
Yeah, Mitch, I think that's a great comment. For the people who are on the webinar, I don't know if you know that Mitch wrote a song, and it was called "Find the Rhythm of Your Residents." And there's different ways to spin or explain that, but each one of these communities tends to be very organic. You can try to target a 65-year-old, and it's the 80-year-old who comes in. The market will tell you who you are as much as you'd like to keep them younger for longer. Our position, our strategy is that if we get them at about 75, which is the age that they're coming in, 73 to 75, we should have a 10-year window there if we service them correctly and we provide the value that they're looking for until they're 85 or so and have to move to the next level, which is where the need kicks in.
And Bob, we should talk about that, because we get that question a lot, is like, what's going to happen, when these residents need assisted living? And, my one flip answer is I want to be right next to Danielle. It's like she said, on that property in Rohnert Park, it maybe was a bit of a forerunner when we built it 15 years ago. But anyway, this is a great slide, Bob. I'd like you to speak a little bit to this, because we get this question a lot. Where do these folks come from? And then, what are the migration patterns? Because again, it is highly variable depending on location.
Yeah, it is, but it's also clustered around a certain data points. On the top of this page, again, is that bell curve that's shown, and obviously that hump there is 70 to 85. That's who our residents have been. We try to build our active adult projects so that when the senior comes and visits and tours and leaves, that they're as turned on as a millennial will going into some urban high rise with the amenities we've got, the lifestyle we've got, the landscaping we've got. But it really kind of boils down to being a very local market. It's a little bit like rolling sevens. If you take that on the right side pie chart, the blue and kind of that rust sienna color, that's really ownership. About 65 to 70% of our residents are selling a home to come live with us. And with 50% of them selling a single family home, that's what takes a long time to make a decision. My background is both multifamily and for sale housing. So we were used to the seriousness of the decision versus a millennial that comes into town on a Friday, gets a job, rents an apartment on Saturday. This is a long, protracted time period. And Mitch, I'd be curious, we're seeing about a 40% drop off from our pre-leasing to when we're ready to go to contract. And we start 9 to 12 months in advance of the building being completed. And it's, in that 9 months, the fragility of some residents who really want the lifestyle, having to go to a higher level of care is about half of our cancellations.
We've seen, like you're always going to have drop off from pre-leasing to lease up, and we've addressed it with some specific tactics. We've actually engaged with a national firm that helps people resell their homes. It's been effective. And who would have believed that in the middle of this pandemic that this, as Katja said, the home market has been so strong. That certainly has helped us with our continued lease ups, where we're and even some of our pre-leasing. But the fall off is, usually if you come at the back door, higher level of care is absolutely probably reason number one. And what I said earlier about, isn't this just going to become another congregate living situation where the people aren't independent? It seems to be somewhat self-selecting. Obviously fair housing, you have to be extremely careful. Greystar is incredibly, thoughtful about all those things and compliant with all those things. But, it may be that it's a little bit of peer pressure and some gentle conversations with families, but we've been able to keep our average age right in that 72 to 74 range so far. And I look back on some of the buildings that Tony and I built in the early 2000s, and even the one in Rancho Santa Margarita, which is now 16 years old, the average age in that's only gone up to about 77, which is pretty good, I think. And yeah, there's a little frailty in that building, but it's not in your face. When you walk in, you don't get that sense of it. So I think everything. Mitch, yeah, go ahead, Danielle.
If I could just add, right now we're currently operating 136 units of independent living. But previously in Clearwater's infancy, we were managing close to 900 units as a third-party manager. And all of these communities were new development in lease up. And I thought it might be interesting just to throw this out that, Bob, just like you're experiencing an active adult and having 40% of your depositors fall off, we experienced, our number was 37%. So right there with you for IL, we're experiencing the same that you are an active adult.
Yeah, I think that's one of the motivators. I say it's not a need-based product, but in reality, I think it is a need-based. When that senior says, I need to get around people, I need to have fun, I need to be in a social environment, I think that's a powerful driver.
Good segue, Bob.
Go back one, Mitch. Go back one, because I want to ask Danielle.
It's like you practiced that.
Yeah. If you look at that left side pie chart, that turquoise there, don't want to be pejorative, Danielle, but what we're seeing, and that's part of the questions, I think, are we competitive? Are we complementary? I think we're both, but the reality is we're seeing about 15% of our residents moving down from IL. And I just think it's because we're the better fit. At the time they went into that IL, your buildings are probably better looking and better located. But at the time, that resident was saying, I've got to downsize, I've got to get somewhere else. The only option was IL. And then active adult comes into town, there's that educational process, and they say, maybe I can still cook for myself and save a little bit of money.
We've seen a little bit of that, but nowhere near 15%.
Yeah.
which may account for the difference in our average age right now. But one interesting thing that I'll note here, and we should keep moving, is that purple box. We are seeing in certain locations a considerable amount of move-ins from existing Sun Cities, Del Webb's 55 plus for sale communities. Very often it's one of the spouses has passed away or they've gotten divorced or something, and they're still sitting on that house and they don't want it. They don't want to deal with the house anymore. And it's become, I would have never thought when we started this that we would see the kinds of numbers we're seeing moving from one of those in locations where we're close by, in particular, Charlotte and several other locales around the country. But it's a notable trend that I've been somewhat surprised at. I mean, we always expected the single family home and ownership, the two big boxes on the right. And we don't really see a lot of people, apartment, traditional multifamily has only happened when we're in a market where there's a mid to high rise elevator product with high levels of service. And that's something now we kind of watch out for. I call it kind of a shadow market. Some of you may remember the term NORC, naturally occurring retirement community. If you build an active adult in the middle of a bunch of NORCs, you're probably going to have a little tougher time. But and then last thing on this one, and I think we need to keep moving. It's just the 20 plus miles away. This migration thing is really interesting too, and that we're seeing people traveling. Grandparents and the adult children in this world are 10 to 15 years younger than, or even 20 years younger than the adult children in the traditional senior living world. They're in their 30s. They're echo boomers having children, having grandchildren, and the grandparents are making a conscious decision to move near them, but not necessarily in the back bedroom. And when we did Remington and Ladera Ranch years ago, that was something that Sarah's Regis, Lynn Clue and I were surprised at that time, how many of those young grandparents we got coming into South Orange County because we built a project that was nice enough for them to live in, if not forever, at least for a couple of years. So anyway, let's move on maybe.
Yep.
And just cover these last two slides and then we'll start into the Q&A.
Sure. I think the next two slides are all about I'll call it service, but it's about the programs. Each community, we do have a resident enrichment director or lifestyle director that really engages early. The three main tenets we follow is, our people, it does take special people, and we may or may not touch on it, but whether they are very enlightened, multifamily managers, or they're coming from higher care and excited about dealing with seniors because they do have a big heart, but they just are kind of burned out by dealing with the health situations, or they come from hospitality. And certainly we believe that our product is an intersection of not only residential, not only seniors, because it is age restricted, but it's also, there's a hospitality component. They do want to be treated as if it's a private club, and we are really emphasizing that boutique residential club concept, especially in our infill projects, which is most of them. And so if you go to the next one, is just the 5 to Thrive. Most of us have some kind of a branded activities or life enrichment program, and ours is 5 to Thrive. It's been in application for just about 2 years. Everything that happens in the community from sunrise to whenever the activities stop at night is associated with one of those 5 pillars of wellness. And it is the vehicle by which the resident is able to live that life that they're aspiring to. So that's, is there another one?
Just the grand finale.
Yeah, okay, well, if Thelma and Louise were alive today, that'd be them at an Avenida pool. So.
That's great. I love it. Okay. They're terrific, Bob. Thanks. That was great. I see we have, I don't know if we have questions yet, but I've got a couple lead-off questions, and then Katja, if you want to throw on top of those, we've got about another half an hour. We're going to try to wrap this by 10:30 at the latest.
Yeah.
So let me start out with a very timely one. Like active adult has quickly become one of the most talked about segments in senior housing and care. both among traditional senior housing investors as well as developers and operators of conventional multifamily like Greystar. Do we, any of us can answer this, do we foresee overbuilding similar to what happened with assisted living in the late 1990s and early 2000s? It's certainly a concern I have. I'm just curious to hear what your thoughts on that, Bob and Danielle.
Well, God, I've been in the development business since 1976, and no matter how many lessons we have to learn, there always ends up being an overbuilding situation. There will be developers who think it looks easy, and from a structural standpoint, it is. If you're a multifamily guy, building an active adult, you get one of the architects that you've used, Mitch, or that I've used, and you can duplicate it. Operations is the big, huge challenge. I think that there are limiting factors now. The lenders, know much better how to underwrite investors who've been in it. And as long as they're not a tourist investor that says, oh, I want to play in that game, which I think COVID has really tamped that down. I think that the financial community, the capital markets is going to keep a lid on it. My hope would always be if I've got a competitor, that at least they do it right. It's the ones who don't do it right that's going to give the asset class a bad name and is going to affect the acceptance by the market of what we're trying to do.
Great comment. Danielle?
Quite honestly, I absolutely agree with what Bob had to say. I do think it's hard to have that crystal ball though, and I think a lot of it is driven by markets too, and really figuring out how to dial in the price point that's right for the market that'll work. But it's hard to know at this point.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, one of the things I've been concerned with is the fact that when we got all into senior housing in the early mid 90s, was when I got into it, there was no data, there was no CoStar, there was no, none of that. There was nothing. And Nick was created around creating that transparency and providing those metrics. And, today we're in the same boat with active adult. Nobody's, the multifamily folks don't cover us. I've talked to the Nick leadership. I mean, Beth, I think, wants to, but most of the rest of them are going, yeah, it's too small. It's not really worth our time. So we're really kind of our own data set. I mean, I think between Bob, a handful of us, we have probably most of the data about this business internally, and we've had to create it ourselves. And so it'll be interesting to see, because I think that the transparency that Nick and Asha and the other organizations created was to keep train wrecks from the AL overbuilding of 99, when two sunrises and a partridge in a pear tree would show up in the same street corner and everybody would try to open at the same time. That clearly was a train wreck. And I'm hoping that doesn't happen again. But I do tend to agree with Bob. I think there is a bit more discipline now, but still, you give a developer money. Come on, Bob.
It's hard to get money today.
Yeah. Another question here. Really, Danielle sort of spoke to this a little bit already, but I love this question. It's, we've always talked about the blurring of the lines in this business. It used to be the blurring of the lines between IL and AL. Now my question is, there's a lot of groups developing either standalone IL, as example, the Wolf portfolio, the Rebels, beautiful buildings, or something called IL Light, which nobody can quite define, which is something between, the traditional IL and really true active adult, which is everything a la carte. Do these concern you guys in terms of, are we confusing the market? And if somebody builds these too close together, it's similar to the overbuilding question, but it's more about, we're having a hard enough time educating our customer about what we're doing. And so how do we bridge this sort of blurring issue?
I don't know, maybe I'm naive and seeing it in a different way, that I don't necessarily see it as a problem. I think it's a real advantage. Especially because, what's important to baby boomers is choice. And the fact that even in IL today, it's very blurred, right? There's licensed IL that's clearly labeled as IL only because, it's an assisted living licensed unit, but nobody's receiving care in that apartment. So they're labeled IL, which is different from, the community we operate in Oxnard, Clearwater at River Park. It's 136 units of unlicensed IL. And our competitive market there for true IL, unlicensed, is serving 3 meals a day and housekeeping and maintenance, whereas we're on more of an a la carte and a point-based system for the services that you use. So even within traditional IL, it's very blurry.
Yeah.
But I see it as an advantage. It's not cookie cutter because AL has morphed into that and is more cookie cutter. The consumer understands assisted living now, but I happen to like the fact that there's choice and variety out there.
Yeah, I'm right with Danielle. I think that is one of our advantages, that every community almost kind of becomes curated. And, you know, I kind of think of, you know, you can shop at Nordstrom's, you can shop at May Company, and, you know, both of them will sell you a jacket, but the experience is different. And also like a crossover SUV. What was that when it came out? but the buyers went and looked at it and said, yeah, that's the right fit for me. So I think it makes our job harder for sure. You know, it makes our marketing people really work a lot harder, think a lot harder. And that, again, I think is part of the discouragement of people wanting to enter this business, is that there's no playbook yet. So you better be ready for a lot of hard work and making some mistakes.
Yeah, I like to say that our active adult business is the best kept secret in the senior housing business, because when you talk to our residents, they love living there. I'm not making this stuff up. I mean, we survey the heck out of them. We talk to them all the time. They're generally a great, joyful group of people to be around. And they literally say to us, you're doing a really crappy job of telling the rest of the world why we love it here. And that just kills you. Obviously, we're getting better at it, and we have some real talent now among our respective organizations who can do that. But telling our story, especially in a time of COVID, is still something that there's a lot of work to do on that topic. I believe. Yep.
So,
Go ahead, Dan. Gotcha.
We have some questions from the audience.
Okay.
If I can read those to you. So the first one is G, and it's directed to Bob. It says, Bob, you mentioned 15% formerly IL looking for AA lifestyle. What are they finding in AA that you believe they did not find in IL?
Good question. And my answers would be what they found in active adult is a better fit for them. As I said, most of, you know, I think it's true for Mitch also, is that every community we go build in, we're the first one there. So the educational process as to just what we are takes a lot of time and effort. And so those who were in IL, because it was the only place that was, you know, age restricted and designed for seniors, have realized, well, I like to cook for myself. And it just wasn't the right fit. And so I think, and they are also going to save some money is the reality. Now, we've lost some people to IL that said, you know, I really liked that country club feel where I could go into the dining room and have my food prepared. So I think it's a matter of that, and also something that Danielle spoke to and Mitch has mentioned. You know, we try, but we can't control the ages that come in. And so if a local, IL building just ended up being right on the verge of AL for the younger groups, and 75 is really young today, they're just going to say, I just don't want to be around those people. I'm going to take my chances with an active adult where I'll be around younger people. So that's my answer.
Okay, thank you, Bob. The other one comes from Russ Curry, and it's directed to the entire panel. What type of amenities are you offering in your active adult market?
So to be clear, do you think the question is directed more toward physical space amenities or programmatic ones? Gotcha.
That's a good question.
I'll take a pass at the physical. Well, yeah. Physical amenity wise, we're constantly refining them. I mean, every project is a learning experience, and the next one you learn. The big challenge is we have to do more with less. In other words, what I mean by that is, in conventional independent living, and obviously it goes up as you go into AL and memory care, you have common areas that approach 35, 40+% of your building. We can't afford that. We're not getting that kind of margin. So we're trying to find the right sweet spot of building just enough but not too much. And what we do build, we're trying to make these spaces morphable. In other words, if one space only does one thing all day, that's a problem. If it's sitting dark for the majority of the day of the business hours, that's not good. So each successive clubhouse, we're figuring out ways to take a club room, kind of a resident kitchen, put it next to a yoga studio, group exercise room that opens up so that, you can go from a room that can hold, because we have parties, we have good parties. I mean, we turn out 100 to 125 people, and it's hard to do that and keep a space that big sitting there all day for that. So finding ways to make our common areas morphable. We've done embedded clubhouses, we've done standalone clubhouses, but I would say we're picking off the most important aspects of IL amenity spaces. For example, most of us, I think Bob's building included, have a movie theater or a media center, media room of some kind. But we used to do these big Barca Lounger chairs, and I came in and said, let's do some comfortable chairs that can be moved around so that same room can function for another event later in the day or something else. So those kinds of tweaks and nuances, but it's mostly similar to IL, but less of them, and maybe a little more multi-purpose. So Bob, you want to layer onto that? Danielle, maybe talk.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. We've learned the active adult product isn't that old. I mean, the first ones are built are just now sort of hitting stabilization. What we're not including in the amenity package are last generation things or more IL things like the beauty salon. As long as there's a little room that can be a massage room and maybe a mani-pedi comes in. We have two product lines. One is what we call our cachet or upscale. We're about 9,000 to 10,000 square feet of common area, and we're trying to make them more flexible. But there's certain things you need. You need the parlor or the entry area that looks like the opening or the entry area of a country club or even a home. And then in our more value-oriented product, we're about 6,500 square feet, and we're going to see how that works, where spaces are going to be really multi-purposed and really super flexed.
Do you want to talk about kind of the service offering or things you guys are thinking about in terms of how to deliver that with 5 FTEs or 6 FTEs?
That's right. It's going to be a technology. It's going to be about technology.
The hard question.
It's going to be technology is going to help, but it really gets back down to the people. We started with executive directors, and now we have community managers, and those community managers are kind of universal employees. They wear multiple hats, and they're going to set up the activity program, and whether it's a Well Beats kind of program where she can program the line dancing or the yoga or whatever, we're going to try to be more resident directed. And I know Danielle and Mitch would agree, boy, if you've got 150 apartment units, these are accomplished people. They are seniors, but they've been den mothers, they've been managers. They can really take care of themselves if you set it up right. At least that's our belief, and they want to do what they want to do. So if that's our goal, is to make it more resident directed, and our community manager is just going to be an assist to do that.
What I find interesting though in active adult is that it seems to me, and maybe I'm off with that, but my perception is there's some testing the waters with a culinary program, whether it's just offering a continental breakfast daily or doing a Thursday happy hour with a guest chef that's cooking a particular recipe or meal, or Sunday brunches. So as we talk about blurring of the lines and the offering package being so different, this culinary piece in active adults seems to be creeping in a bit. I don't know, Mitch,
it should be creeping in. I mean, being very out candid, I think we're struggling with it. We started out doing continental breakfast daily. Most of our customers, you're asking people, on top of doing all these other things, to go out and figure out a culinary program. Whereas in senior living, we had a chef, we had a corporate, food, a culinary person that came out of the CIA. I mean, this is a different world. And yeah, you can go to Costco and get some really good, fresh, healthy stuff, put it out there. we're finding we have two segments like Bob. We have the Overture Everly, the more upmarket, and we have we just launched our mid-market brand, the Elvin brand. And, but you know, we found a lot of our more upmarket customers just didn't value, they want to have breakfast in their apartment. They come down for coffee, they come down to be social,
Yeah.
but it wasn't like the food thing wasn't really the thing. I think there's a huge opportunity there for a really innovative culinary thing. I don't think any of us have yet figured it out. And I've literally done some preliminary work with Rick Morrison, because they know how to do it in the CCRC world. So, but it's in its infancy, and we got a long way to go there. I think we're better at the whole person wellness piece. Of Bob's program is really elegant and very well thought through. That piece seems to be very well. It's critical, right? It's a core piece of what we offer that creates this small premium to multifamily that we talk about. But yeah, Danielle, you're spot on there. And if you figure it out, you and Tony, let me know.
Great. Okay, here's the next question from Dustin. How are you determining the pricing or rental rates for AA units, especially since there are so few comps? The rule of thumb is in between Class A multifamily and IL rates. Is that an accurate standard?
That's how it got started. But the answer I would give you today is no, it's not accurate, because we back tested 32 different properties to validate it. Now, having said that, you know, if our friends from Carlisle were on the phone, they would show data, and the data is legit, that we do command a premium over like-kind conventional multifamily. There's no doubt about it. Whether you can rely on that, on going back to where Bob started this conversation, each market, whether you can rely on that from market to market, is where there's concern. And what we now really use in addition to that, that's how we got started, because there were no comps. Great question, and you're right. Discount to IL, premium to multifamily. Today, we are much more focused on traditional rent income, especially by cohort. We're focused on what the homes are selling for in the market, much the way that CCRC folks have always done it, because that's indicative of an asset value that's going to be used by most of our residents for this lifestyle. And then we've dug deeper, and we've gone into using the Experian, Alteryx, Esri type data. I know Bob's done this with Rich Gallis, and that is really where you really get better at this, is when you really, like, market by market, be very precise about what your psychographic PMA is, and then really look at who are the key components of our residents that have already chosen to live with us. Are they there, and what do they want? And so that's where we came from, the question you asked, full to what we're doing today. And yeah, we still look at it, but it's not the be all and end all it was at the beginning of this.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Mitch, do you know what percentage of the seniors' income they are spending for your rent?
Yeah, look, again, it's not, I hate to make generalizations, because we see this bifurcation, even in our upmarket buildings, where, you know, we have mid-market customers in our upscale buildings, and we have upscale customers probably are going to come into our early mid-market. It's just the percentages are going to vary. Richard talks about, you know, the prevalence of any one of these mosaic profiles or these Esri, you know, clusters never make up more than about 10%. And so you've got a myriad of profiles of psychographics coming into your building, and that has to show up in your unit mix. It has to show up in where your premium units are and your quote affordable units are. So it's not easy to say it's this number. I mean, certainly if you get close to 35% rent income, you should have a yellow or red light flashing at you going, you better be careful here. But there are some markets, like in Las Vegas, buildings we've owned that Ken Templeton built, where, you know, some of those residents, at least reported income, they'll spend a lot. They'll spend 35% or more. Is that a good thing? Probably not. And it speaks to a question I want to get into before we end here about how the heck are we going to make this more affordable? Because we're facing the same challenges, making deals pencil, getting our rents right, and you'll hit the nail on the head at the beginning. If you get that wrong, it's very, very difficult. And if you get it right, you got some room to, you know, to maneuver. But and Bob said it, even though they have a lot of money, we have some residents that have reported incomes of $250,000 to $1 million, like in Kierland, in Scottsdale. Do they want to spend it?
Right.
Not really. I mean, they want, they want the stuff, but then they also want to deal. They want value.
Mhm.
And however you define that CVP, that customer value proposition that my sister loves to talk about and great marketers talk about, that's the art of the deal there. No pun intended. That was a bad one. Sorry.
But to ask, to answer the question regarding rule of thumb, wouldn't you say it's a rule of thumb response would be 50% discount to independent living and approximately, I don't know, 20% higher than traditional?
Those are the best rules of thumb. If you had to go by those rules of thumb, yes, that's exactly right.
If you could do that, you'd have a winner project. It's just really tough. It's really tough.
Well, especially as you begin to add services and amenities, right?
Oh, yeah.
It all comes at a price.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that was that fourth question. What does it really cost to operate? And once we made the mistake, you don't get to test a service with our resident and then take it away.
Right.
Once you put it in, it's staying, and you're gonna live with it. So
that is absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think the next one is an interesting one as well. To all panelists, it says, how has COVID-19 affected your communities? What short-term and long-term changes do you foresee?
Well, I guess I'll go first on that one. If you were to ask me what I would think today in March or April, I was scared to death, literally. And incredibly, through this whole COVID situation, we have, I wouldn't say we've completely flourished, but we have really kept our head above water. We have continued to open buildings very carefully. We've pivoted to virtual marketing, lead generation, virtual leasing, touring. Thank God, that's where Graystar comes in, really. I mean, you've got this horsepower to play off what the conventional teams are doing and what other teams are doing. But we've had very little health issues in our buildings. Thank God. We shut down early. We stayed shut down longer. Even when reopening was allowed on the conventional side, we continued to be very cautious. And look, some of our residents are grumpy because, hey, they want to hang out. They moved in here to be with their friends, and that isn't, we prohibited that, but we've managed that and kept it to a minimum to protect them and to protect our own team. So we've continued I think the story when it's written, and I feel a lot of empathy for all of our colleagues on the senior living side, especially those who run mostly high acuity AL memory care. My gosh, I mean, what they've been through compared to what we've experienced with active adult has been just night and day. And it's not anybody's fault. I mean, it's the nature of the residents. We don't have the traffic through these buildings. We don't have massive deliveries every day. We don't have people coming and going. We did limit family visits, and that caused some frustration, but they understood the why as long as they knew it. And our teams just did amazing things to keep the residents engaged and happy. Concerts in the courtyard, and they'd all come out on their balconies with a glass of wine. And it was just, I mean, the videos, we have a YouTube channel that captured all this stuff. I'm just blown away. Nothing to do with me, all about operations, because at the end of the day, it's still really like senior housing. This is about operations and about people, as Bob said. And when you've got the right people in the building, you don't have to have a Taj Mahal building. You can have a very successful building. So we've proven through COVID that we're resilient, and I think, knock wood, it'll continue.
How did it impact Graystar's move-ins?
Well, we had the biggest impact was that Danielle. It was people were selling a home and they said, "Oh, I'm not comfortable moving right now. I don't take my apartment. I want to hold on to my apartment. I'm coming, but I'm going to wait. I want to wait a while because I don't think it's safe." So that's been the biggest impact. It's not so much cancellations. It's been delayed move-ins. That's our number one impact.
Sorry, Mitch, do you see though from a design perspective, on future projects that certain things will come into play as we design these apartments, or would you say everything goes back to normal, you know, or back to where it was before? There's certainly aspects that we will have to.
Yeah, no, there will be changes. Luckily, I think because of the nature of these clubhouses we've always isolated our clubhouses with rated doors. So we did that because we wanted our residents to feel secure when the clubhouse was after business hours. That was extremely helpful during COVID. And the fact that we had the ability to isolate the residential corridors from the clubs in almost all of our buildings. But you know, the big open communal areas, I mean, we're putting in this air purification system now. We're beta testing it in 6 locations. Very interesting technology. We're not going to go back to the same food program for the foreseeable future for obvious reasons. We're going to focus more on outdoors like everybody else is. I mean, there will be, and even the design of the apartments today, I mean, having workspace, a lot of 30, I don't know what you see, Bob, Danielle, but I think 30 to 35% of our residents still work full or part-time, which is a significant number. In some buildings, it may be higher than that. And many of them, because of the intellectual nature of their backgrounds, can work remotely. So putting desks into pockets, you know, between the kitchen and the living area, all kinds of different aspects of this. Going back, we started out with all the fancy no-touch faucets, and then we VE'd them out. now we're going to probably put them all back. You know, there will be changes, and we're looking
large and small, kind of on a micro and macro level, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Bob, do you see those?
Yeah, we're tracking exactly with you and your team, Mitch, of the things that we can do. You know, it really blindsided us, blindsided our staff, blindsided me. That was never thought I'd have to deal or think about infection control. That's why I got into active adult, because I didn't know medical and didn't want to. So it really blindsided us. I think we responded really well. It was stressful for our staff, our teams, but throughout COVID, we made leases every month and had move-ins every month. But certainly did experience those who said, "Hey, I can't sell my house because no one can come look at it. So I want my apartment, but I've got to wait." Yeah. We're focused mostly on the air treatments, on the HVAC systems. You know, the entire thesis for active adult is that ability to come together. And if you take that away, then it really kind of, why am I here then? And so it's going to be interesting to see how we come out of it. I do expect we're going to come out closer to the old normal. It will be a new normal, but closer to the old normal than something like, Danielle, you have to do, where you're providing you know, some kind of a medical assistance.
I will say the way that our independent living has performed during this period of COVID actually has pleasantly surprised me. I thought our move-ins would be more impacted than they have been. In fact, our IL has outpaced our AL move-ins, and it's a head scratcher for me because AL is definitely need driven from a care perspective. But because those AL residents are frail, where it works for that senior to remain at home with a loved one, they're doing that as much as possible, I guess. But the IL resident was still moving in. To your point, Mitch, you know, instead of moving in within 30 days, we were allowing them to, you know, reserve their apartment for 60 days, which we typically don't do. But yeah, we continued to grow occupancy, which has been a great thing for us and shocked me.
Very good. I think we're almost at the end here, and I know, Mitch, you have another engagement. So unless we have maybe a couple more questions, but I'm not sure if we have time for it, Mitch. I want to.
You know what? Why don't you? You know, if you have the person who asked the question, Bob and I, Danielle, we'd have shoot him a quick answer.
Sure.
But really appreciate. Yeah. Hopefully we'll get back to a SAGE meeting where we can all be in the same room. And I know you have some closing. So. You have some closing remarks you want to do, but thanks for the opportunity. Hopefully it was helpful.
Thank you so much, Mitch, first of all, for leading us through this discussion. And thank you to our panelists, Danielle and Bob, for sharing so much good information and insights. Personally, for me, I can say I learned a lot, and I hope the audience will feel the same way. I'm sure about that. So before we close, just want to give a couple shout outs to, we have a couple programs to close out the year. We have a virtual celebration on October 28th. Call for entry will be out on October 7th, where we want to highlight a couple outstanding projects that we want to showcase to all of you. And then we close the year on November 19th with a discussion with Adrian Foley from Brookfield on the recent mall acquisition and how it applies to the senior adult market. So thank you again for joining us today. Thank you to the panel. Thank you, Mitch. Hope everybody is healthy and stay safe, and hope to see you at our next program. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Katja.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank
Katja.
you.
See everybody.
Take
Bye.
care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Be well. Bye.